Bounding ball stopped by Truby for the second one, really the first two for the price of one for the Tigers. A great play by Truby.
In 1966, Tigers radio broadcaster Ernie Harwell donated his extensive baseball photograph collection to the Detroit Public Library. Ernie continued to add to the vaults and use the facility for research for the rest of his Hall of Fame career. Nearly 50 years later, curator Mark Bowden takes us on a tour inside the treasures of Detroit's very own Cooperstown.
You got information on the back?
Yep.
If you're lucky?
If we're lucky, it identifies the player, the team, maybe the date or the year.
A look inside the collection and the generous spirit that made Ernie Harwell the voice of summer and one of the most beloved men in Detroit's history on the next Digging Detroit.
Hi, I'm Pete Kalinski. Welcome back to Digging Detroit. Today we're going to be talking to Mark Bowden, the curator and archivist of the Ernie Harwell Collection at the Detroit Public Library. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but the Detroit Public Library is going to turn 150 this year, and the Burton Collection itself is 100 years old. There's a lot of treasures about Detroit in these collections, and we're going to take a look at one of them.
And the windup and the pitch. He swings a line shot, base hit, right field, the Tigers win it. Here comes Kale to score, and it's all over. Downward singles, the Tigers mob Don. Kale has scored, the fans are steaming on the field, and the Tigers have won their first pennant since 1945. Let's listen to the bedlam here at Tiger Stadium.
Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. So, Mark, could you tell us a little bit about the collection, how the Detroit Public Library got it?
Well, it was a donation from Ernie Harwell. In 1966, he made his initial donation of about 7,000 baseball photographs. Ernie was a lifelong baseball fan and a collector of all things baseball. He needed to do something with this material that he was amassing. And over the years, Ernie made subsequent donations. In other words, the collection didn't come in all at once. It started with the photographs and books, and over the years, even till the last year or so of his life, when we take a look in the room, there were some things that Ernie donated to us, and of course the library has also purchased materials.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Ernie? I mean, who was this guy? Why is Ernie such an important figure for Detroit baseball?
Well, Ernie was a Southern gentleman. He was born in 1918 in Georgia, Washington, Georgia, a little small town. Baseball was his father's passion, and so from a very young age, Ernie talks about listening to the 1927 World Series with his brother on the radio, and they had headphones. We only had one pair of headphones, and so him and his brother put their heads together and put the headphones on either side of their ears, and they listened to the 1927 World Series. From a young age, went down to the local drugstore where there was a former baseball player who knew Ty Cobb. Ernie would go down there and pretend to call baseball games. The funny thing is, he had a speech impediment, had trouble pronouncing his S's and THs, and so they sent him to what was then called an elocution teacher, a speech therapist. And one of the poems that this person had Ernie memorize and work on called The House That Stood by the Side of the Road.
There's a breaking ball in for a strike, and he stood there like the house by the side of the road and watched it go by. Struck him out.
And it was George Kale who recruited him.
Aside from longevity, what is it that you think was Ernie's hold on Detroit? Because, you know, for those of us who grew up following the Tigers over the course of his career, you know, it's the Tigers and Ernie. So what do you think that might be?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. One, I think it's his voice and his style of calling games. I recall listening to Ernie, as many people do, and just the calmness, the Southern drawl, and the command of the game, and his stories. not so much stat-driven, but anecdotal stories about the personalities in the game. So that's one level, kind of the professional level and his style. On a personal level, Ernie was what he seemed to be, which was an absolute kind and generous man who always had time for the fans. After Ernie had passed away, we had received from the state several thousand letters and cards that had been written to Ernie, most of which were after he'd made his announcement of his illness. And time and time again, there were countless stories of, I met you after a doubleheader. It's like 12:30 at night, coming out of Tiger Stadium, and we came up to you and you spent 20 minutes with us. Same thing with people trying to get into announcing. They would write, and I was so surprised you called and left a message on my voicemail. And I still saved that voicemail and I have your voice on it.
He is the DH today. Swing, there's a drive to left. That one is long gone. Here's the pitch on the way. He swings and fouls it off. It'll reach the seats over back of the Tiger dugout. And the man from Walla Walla will take that one home.
One of the things I brought out is a volume of Detroit Tigers team correspondence, which we have from about 1903 to 1912. And this is the 1905 volume. And what's in it is a carbon copy, an old carbon copy, which is really hard to see. So there's a typescript over here. But what it is, it's dated August 25th, 1905, and it's from the Tigers, writing to a Mr. Cobb, Ty Cobb, that they've just purchased his contract for $700, and that he's to report at once to Detroit. This brief 1-2 sentence letter began the Hall of Fame career of Ty Cobb, and probably, without a doubt, the greatest Tiger and one of the greatest ball players of all time. So quite a deal for $700. We've got some World Series programs. Here's 1945, their second World Series win. Okay. This against the Cubs.
Chicago.
And of course, the 1968 series. And we have a 1984 Detroit Tigers yearbook. These World Series scrapbooks we have. This is, again, the 45 World Series between the Tigers and the Cubs. And they'll be covering the entire World Series, from introductions to individual players to action shots of the series. And so these are more like Associated Press photos, I think, and stuff. So this one just happens to be on the Tigers and the Cubs.
Any effort to get these digitized?
Glad you asked that, because we, in October of last year, the library launched its digital collections, which is online. If you go to DetroitPublicLibrary.org, very top of on the gray bar, menu bar, is digital collections. What you'll find are there are over 72,000 images from all of the special collections, including the Harwell. So we have digitized some materials, and we continue to do so. And in fact, when you go online, you can even select, because it's a named collection, click on Ernie Harwell Collection once you're in the digital library, and that'll bring up everything that's been digitized. One other thing I wanted to show you that kind of unique, Willie Horton is an iconic figure.
Oh yeah.
The Detroit Tigers, and his contributions to their World Series victory in '68, and as a human being, and contributions to the organization and the city, tracing his career from when he was in high school and just being scouted up through his major league career.
Segui, the pitch, swung on, a drive to left. That'll be the ball game. It's over the head of Gosma. McLean runs his 30th. Here comes Stanley in to score. Willie Horton has a single, and the ball game is over, and the Tigers win it 5-4. Jimmy McLean is one of the.
With all these clippings, what he would do is then take notes and put anecdotes down on 3x5-inch index cards. So when you think about the Ernie Harwell collection, it's really a library, it's a research collection. You can think of it as Ernie's personal library. And that's how he used it. And it happened to dovetail nicely, which made Ernie the great historian of the game that he was too. There was hardly a baseball scenario that Ernie didn't have a story that he could relate to that that had happened before. So that's unique in how we use the collection.
Set the pitch. He swings. Bounding ball. Stopped by Truby for the second one. Really the first. Two for the price of one for the Tigers. A great play by Truby to end the third.
Another thing we have here, this is we have scorecards that are of Ernie's. This is actually from 1996. It's a game between the Yankees and the Red Sox. So Ernie was calling a national broadcast.
He would do this during the game just to help keep track of.
Right.
This is like his broadcast notepad.
Yeah. There are rules about keeping score, but I've learned from those that actually keep score, it's really more of an art form, and everyone kind of, in some ways, makes it their own. And this is what a scorecard of Ernie's looks like. Signed Denny McLean baseball here, and that's the signed Jim Leland ball. Okay. Baseball right there. Even Ernie's 1968 World Series ring. He got it framed for 1968, and that's it right there. And of course, some of the vintage photos you'll see up on the wall, some of which have been reproduced and enlarged, from the Cobb Baker spiking incident.
Oh, yeah. Lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of the singing of birds is come, and the voice of the turtle is heard in our land.
For those who don't know, Ernie was a songwriter.
Oh, really?
And he wrote about 60 or so songs that have been published. Mainly pop and love songs. For example, You Wake Up Wiser, Baby, and Soft Quiet Loving. And you see he's got songwriting credits on there. But of course, his most famous composition was Move Over Bank, Here Comes Henry, as Hank Aaron was closing in on Babe Ruth's home run record.
Move over, babe, here comes Henry, and he's swinging me. Move over, babe, Hank's hit another, he'll break that 714.
So obviously, there's quite a bit of the older baseball.
Sure. This one's Cass Baseball Club of Detroit from 1884. Terrific piece. This one and the other one that you'll notice how it's like a bucolic park setting.
Right, yeah.
And columns and then from here to some of the various iterations of the development of Detroit Tigers uniform.
Yeah, I never knew that they had an actual tiger in 27.
Looks kind of funny, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm glad they moved away from that one. Now, I noticed this as I was walking through earlier. How much do you have about the Stars?
We have some photographs. For example, Turkey Stern is probably the greatest ball player. Not a lot, but we do have some stuff.
So you'd be very happy if someone was to make donations.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Very underrepresented.
So, Mark, this room has a lot of stuff on exhibit. I see the seats from Tiger Stadium. Was Ernie looking for anything in particular from the stadium?
He said that what he wanted most of all was the urinals from the visiting clubhouse, because all the greats would have used it, from Babe Ruth to Reggie Jackson, Derek Jeter. However, he had a hard time convincing his wife, Lulu, that was a good idea, and that never worked out.
He swings as a long drive to right, and it is a home run for Gibson. A 3-run homer. The Tigers lead it 8-4 in the 8th inning.
We talked about the indexes that we have downstairs in the Burton, so if you went down there, you could go to the cigarette card section and find out which cards we have and make a request. And staff would bring it to you. Here is Goodwin and Company Old Judge card, and a C. Alcott. His name. So. And
about what time are we looking at?
This is going to be about 1887 to 1890.
Okay. All right. So you just got that with a pack of cigarettes?
Yeah, or chewing tobacco.
Or tobacco, yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm sure the players got a little cut of whatever they were sponsoring.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to see
athletes.
Yeah, Jackie Robinson or Mickey Mantle touting the health benefits of Lucky Strike cigarettes.
How much of the Harwell collection does this encompass?
From the rest of the books to the clippings files to the photographs. We can take a look at the photographs. It's overwhelmingly focused on baseball, the Harwell collection, but it does have something on all the major sports, and even sports like the Olympics, golf, horse racing, badminton.
So it's a very, very encompassing sports
It is.
archive.
It is. So what you'll see is then they're in these Mylar sheets to
Right.
store photos.
Protects
in.
it.
Yeah, protects
And you
it.
got information on the back.
Yep.
If you're lucky.
If we're lucky, it identifies the player, the team, and maybe the date or the year.
And how many photos?
About 13,000. This might be the part of the collection that Ernie would have used maybe the most, these clippings files, and which is where you would hire a company to peruse the major dailies or major sports publications, and based on the criteria you give them, what your interests are, they would clip those out and send them to you.
Right.
And then inside are newspaper clippings and magazine articles on that person. To emphasize the point that it's more than just baseball players, here's a file on famed owner of the Chicago Bears and NFL legend George Halas.
So this is a pretty comprehensive biographical collection as well.
I think there's probably around 7,000 or 8,000 individual files.
Well, thanks again for letting us stop by.
My pleasure.
Really
Thank
appreciate it. One last question. Who's your tiger?
Alan Trammell.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
And rather than goodbye, please allow me to say thank you. Thank you for letting me be part of your family. Thank you for taking me with you to that cottage up north, to the beach, the picnic, your workplace, and your backyard. Thank you for sneaking your transistor under the pillow as you grew up loving the Tigers. Now, I might have been a small part of your life, but you've been a very large part of mine, and it's my privilege and honor to share with you the greatest game of all.